Hello, my name is Michael Parker, and welcome to episode 15 of Antidote. What would be on your bucket list if you knew you were going blind? Where would you go? What would you want to see? What would you want to remember forever? Today we'll meet a man, his name is Todd Purvis. He and his brother went on a journey around the United States to learn and see things that they may never see again. He joins us in the studio today. Todd, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Todd, I've seen Driving Blind, the film now. I saw it the first time in Santa Monica at a film festival. I believe it was the Aware Fest.
Yep.
I've watched it at home on television a few more times, and it is a touching film. You and your brother both have a degenerative eye disease. The name is difficult for me to say, folks. I'm going to do my best. Choroideremia?
Yep.
And explain to our audience what that is.
Well, it's basically, choroideremia is an X-linked disease, which means it comes from the mother. The mother passes it down. Women pass it down. Women very, very rarely actually show the symptoms. And the symptoms are the peripheral vision goes down to nothing, and then really bad night vision. My brother and I both got it, and you know we were lucky enough to take this trip and actually make a film out of it from our story. Your
brother Justin is younger than you, and he started experiencing symptoms much earlier than you did. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was diagnosed back when he was in his teenage years, because he had really bad night vision, not the peripheral so much when he was younger, but just night vision. And so he actually went to a specialist, and they first diagnosed him with retinitis pigmentosa, macular degeneration, until they finally did a genetic test on him and realized that it was this much more rare disease called choroideremia. So he was diagnosed then, and I was diagnosed probably about 2 years before we went on the trip. Just we knew I had it. I was having night vision problems. I was having peripheral vision problems. But just to get it officially diagnosed, I went and got a genetic test done.
To explain to the audience, when there are varying degrees that you can have this at, and you talk about that in the film, but explain to the audience what it looks like to look through the eyes of a person who has this condition.
It's really difficult to explain. But it's kind of like tunnel vision, or donut vision, where everything out here, there's just spots that are missing. Like right now, for example, I know I have a glass over here, I know my sunglasses are here, but I can't see them. So basically what my brain does, everywhere that's blank, it kind of fills in with similar colors, so I don't notice that things are missing. So if I turn my head, I can see the glass, but when I go back here, I can't see anything over here.
I watched an interview with a man who was also on an interview with you on Huffington Post, I believe. He was describing it, because I believe he's now a painter. His vision, he literally has just this small, almost pinhole vision, and the rest of it's like a blurry kaleidoscope around it. So you still have colors, you have the sensation of color, but you only have this small area that you can see through.
It's kind of like the one thing that kind of annoys me about devices and glasses that are supposed to give you what it feels like is they always have blackness, and it's not blackness. I kind of liken it to if you're staring down a tunnel and the tunnel is made out of mirrors, you can see the colors and stuff and the light, but there's nothing really there. And so it's kind of like walking into a house of mirrors or something like that, where it fills in, and Eric, the guy you were just talking about, he's down to 5%. And it's actually really cool. When he paints, he paints and he takes like 10 feet back to see his picture, then he has to go back in and do the close-up work. So it basically, I think your brain is just filling in the parts that are missing, and it doesn't understand why it's missing, but it's to keep you calm, to keep you under control. It just fills in the picture for you, if that makes sense at all.
It does. So your brother was diagnosed in his teens, in his early teens. You were diagnosed much later in life, but you already knew you had it, because you were experiencing issues with it. I believe the night vision was first. So you guys decide that, listen, we are unfortunately going blind. How did the idea for the trip come about?
My brother and I, his name is Justin, we had talked about doing just a road trip, just as brothers, just to do one, just for fun. And so we got to talking about it, and the more we talked about it, the more I thought, man, that'd make a really cool movie. We should film it. I actually work in Hollywood, work in the TV industry, and was like, well, let's see what we can do to film this. So my brother routed it all out, planned all our stops, and then through a friend of his, we got in contact with a guy named Brian Griffo, who heard our story, met us, and goes, I want to do this, and I want to do it. I'll pay for everything. I'll pay for my entire filming of the film itself. And we were like, okay, that sounds perfect. And we kind of talked about what kind of movie we wanted to have at the end, what kind of story we wanted to tell, so that way it wasn't to us, it wasn't a typical documentary. It was, you know, to us, it was more like, come with us on this journey and see what we see.
I've seen the film, like I said, many times now. This Brian Griffo, who directed it, he was a good candidate to do this because, I mean, he's worked with Anthony Bourdain. I mean, so he's used to the travel kind of vibe. And when I watched the movie, first of all, there's great music in it. There's really good montages. It's very touching. Talk about the crew, because I mean, what you guys are going to do. You've got two brothers going blind who are now going to go.
Who are going to drive around the United States.
Exactly.
Followed by a crew, and the entire crew was 3 people. Brian Griffo was a director and camera guy. Ryan Dietzel was the cinematographer, camera guy, and then we had a guy named Adam Buckley, who was pretty much everything else. The audio guy, the PA, the snacks, the morale guy, everything else we needed. And so they basically followed us around in a cargo van for 38 days. And just, we get to a place, set up a camp or go to a hotel, shoot some, and then sleep, and then get up at 6 a.m. and do it all over again.
Give the audience a sense of the route of the trip so they know how big this was.
We started in Washington, D.C. We went all the way up north to upstate New York. Once we hit New York, we went all the way across the top of the United States through Montana, Ohio, places like that, till we got to Washington State. And then we went down all the way to Los Angeles, and then back across the bottom, the south of the United States, back up to Washington. So we basically just circled the entire United States. And the thought behind that was kind of that we're kind of losing our vision, losing our sight from the outside in, so we wanted to just circumnavigate the entire United States to kind of get the outside. So
around the peripheral, just like
around the peripheral, yeah.
Just like the disease.
It was about 13,500 plus miles, all in about 38 days exactly. So it was a lot of driving.
I don't want to give away the film, but there is a point in the film where you guys go to have your vision checked. And now your brother is declared legally blind. And your current status of your vision is what percentage?
Right now, I'm about 50.
Okay.
So luckily for me, I'm going to give away the film, but my vision hasn't really deteriorated anymore.
Right.
It's kind of peaked out, and the disease is actually supposed to kind of stop around your late 30s. So hopefully for me and for my brother, it's kind of peaked out, but yeah, he's down to about probably 12% now.
They call this a particularly cruel type of blindness because you are born with 20/20 vision. And over time, usually starting in youth or your teens, that's when you begin to notice the loss of vision.
And it's one of the worst parts about the disease is that there's no way to tell, and it's kind of random who's, like in theory, I should have worse eyesight than my brother because I'm older, but that's not the case. And we actually met people in the film, we met 3 brothers who are in their teenage years, and theirs was down to 10% already. So it just is kind of like luck of the draw, how your vision is going to go and when it will hit you. So, but right now, we're hoping with some of the money we're raising with the film to kind of help with the research and help genetic study and stuff like that.
So as you guys go around the U.S., you've got this very small, lean and mean crew of 3 people. You and your brother are in the front car. Did you guys have a GoPro mounted on the front hood or something? Because there's sometimes where literally you're driving down the road and it's clearly being shot through the windshield, but we can hear your dialogue. Okay.
We did it. It was, I cannot give enough credit to the crew. Probably one of the hardest working guys I've ever met. I mean, we had GoPros mounted to each car. We started with 4 GoPros, and I think we finished with 3. I think we lost one along the way.
Sure.
But they had made a car mount, and we actually mounted Canon 7Ds to the hood of the car, and drove with it for a while to get some of those shots that they wanted. And then we'd be mic'd inside the car so you could hear what we were saying.
Sure. It looked great, and there's a lot of wonderful montages. It's a great postcard about America as well. Now, as you guys travel, a lot of people welcome you into their homes. You meet absolute strangers. I believe that people were reaching out to you via social media while you were doing the film as well, right?
Yeah, we had done in the year of kind of prep work. Actually, probably 8 months of prep work. We had put stuff on social media. We had done a crowdfunding to raise money, to raise some funds to help us pay for the trip. And through all of that, we got in contact with people that we stayed with on the trip. And also through our research foundation, we had contacts in pretty much every state where we could, if we needed a place to crash for the night, we could totally show up and crash there. So it was kind of all somewhat set in place, but it was also, we left it kind of loose so that if we found something interesting over here, we can go check it out for a day or so and really kind of get the feel of a road trip.
As you made your way around the U.S., you met interesting people. You met people who have the same condition. In Minnesota, you met a very interesting man.
David and Beth, his daughter, she actually is a carrier of choroideremia.
Yes.
He has choroideremia. He's down to about 5%. And then
this is her father.
This is her father, yes. And her two boys both have choroideremia. And they're in their teenage years, so their eyesight is still pretty good. But we met them, and she's actually the president of the research foundation. So we had kind of arranged to stop with them and talk about fundraising, talk about the disease, and talk about how we can help stop the disease. Not so much for my brother and I, because we're getting older, but for new babies being born, we want to kind of give them a better chance than we had.
Well, we're going to return to that idea because I've been doing some research and I know there's some gene therapy that looks promising for this. As you guys make your way around the U.S., you're going to look at various places. Remember, these gentlemen are losing their sight. They go to Mount Rushmore, and what happens?
It was completely fogged in. The one day we were there, it was complete. We could not see a thing. But we did get a chance to go back at a film festival and actually see the mountain itself instead of just being fogged out.
That was humorous when you guys get there because it's completely, I mean, it's a cloud bank. You guys do something else that's really interesting to me. When I think about this idea of losing my vision, and that's a daunting vision to those, or daunting idea to those of us who aren't. Here you guys are losing your vision, and a couple of times during the trip, you do something rather counterintuitive. You have a lot of quotes within the film. There's one particular quote that's from Jim Morrison, and to me, this almost embodies the entire trip. And that quote was, "Expose yourself to your deepest fear. After that, fear has no power." And when you guys get to Portland, Oregon, you go into sensory deprivation tanks. For anyone who doesn't know, it is exactly what it sounds like. If you've watched the movie in the 70s, Altered States, yes, you go into a container and you float in complete darkness. Talk about that.
That was actually an amazing experience for both of us. And one of the best parts of it was a total shock. They wouldn't tell us what we were doing. A couple times during the trip, they had just planned something and surprised us with it, with good and bad results. But this one was I've always wanted to do it. And so we did it, and it was, for me, an amazing emotional journey, which makes little sense because you're basically in a dark tube floating with nothing around you. But it was so, to me, it was so enlightening and terrifying and uplifting and all this stuff because you get in there and there's a little light that you can turn on and turn off when you first get in. And I remember turning it off and laying there and just almost started bawling because it's so lonely and terrifying, just a complete darkness. But then I kind of would move my head around and kind of float in this water, and I could see where the light was. Like there was no light on, but I could actually see a reflection somewhat of it, and that would bring me to a calm place where I wasn't that afraid, where I could, you know what, it's okay. Take a deep breath, and another thing I do too is like there's really nothing you can do about it, and if you're depressed and in a cage, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to have any experiences. And just because you're losing your sight doesn't mean you can't have the same kind of experience or have the same experience in a different way. You know,
which you've pointed out before, and that's why I think this portion of the film is so interesting because you had mentioned when you first began to think that you had this condition, you were very sad, you were withdrawn, you began to just want to go home.
It was about probably maybe a year or two before I actually took the trip where I started noticing big changes. And it was just horribly depressing, and it was, you know, I'd go run right after work, I'd go straight to my apartment, basically lock myself in and not want to do anything, not want to go to new places, not want to check out new things because it was too difficult for me to function, I thought. Too difficult for me to get around, and I'd go to a party or go to a movie theater, and people would think, why are you just standing there? Why don't you, you know, you're kind of being antisocial. I'm like, well, I can't see.
Yeah.
You know, I remember one time I walked to a business and they had a black couch. So I come in from the sun to a dark office and just ran right into the couch. I don't fall over, but I'm just like, and I'm like, yeah, and it kind of, I mean, it does hurt your ego in a way, but it also is like, you know what, if you use your cane and it'll be fine. And people will more than want to help you if they know there's an issue. If they don't know there's an issue, you can't get upset at them for kind of looking at you in a funny way or even saying things to you. So
the canes are an issue I want to return to, but the isolation tank, so you were very moved and kind of freaked out by it. I've done them as well, and it is very strange at first, and honestly, I was scared initially when I did it as well, but then you kind of get into this place where it's very interesting. But how did Justin feel about it? Because it seemed like he was less affected by that experience.
I don't know if less affected. I think he was affected in a completely different, opposite way. He's very, when he gets nervous or excited, he's very talky and jokey and yada, yada, yada. So I think when he went into it, he actually went in first. And when he went into it, he kind of was scared of it and nervous from it, but he kind of put on the Joker air about it. And so for me, it was, I think maybe because it was a different type of day for me, I was tired. I did pretty much most of the driving during the trip. But so it was just a different experience. And I think he got the similar things out of it, but not, obviously not in the same degree that I did, or the same opposite, you know, parts of the emotional circle. He went this way, I went this way. Does that make any sense?
It does. And to further confront your fear of not being able to see, you continue to go down the West Coast, then you head east. When you get to, I believe it's in far West Texas, Enchanted Rock, you guys decide to do something that I'm sure your parents and insurance companies would have asked you, please don't do that.
This is why it was independent film, because there was no insurance companies around to tell us, don't do this.
Yeah. You guys decide, remember the two darn near blind guys, decide to go on a night hike in Enchanted Rock, west of Texas, desolate, rocky, thorny, potentially venomous snakes. Yeah. I'll let you take it from there.
I would like to clarify, I don't think it was, what we thought was kind of a night hike turned into basically night mountain climbing because there was no trail and it was very, you know, steep. And it was interesting to do it because we did get it done. But it was more, for me, it was more, not only can I not see, and there was a pretty good sized drop here and there that you could fall and really get hurt, but I'm thinking in my head, I got to make sure Justin is okay. Yeah. I'm the big brother, he's the little brother. I mean, make sure he's okay. And he's, of course, bounding around, jumping around, you know, being a superhero. I'm like, just get away from that 25-foot fall right there, because we're in the dark. No one's going to find us. You know, you're going to get hurt. And so, luckily, we climbed up, made it to a point where we were like, you know, okay, it's really dark. Let's go back down. And we actually made it down. And it was to do it. And then afterwards was the best thing, because a lot of things I learned on the trip was that you're more scared of trying something new than you actually are of doing it. Like once you do it, you realize that was a piece of cake. Why was I so nervous? It's like when we jumped off the cliffs into the water. It was just like, oh, we're terrified. But then once you did it, it was a piece of cake, and we did it several times. So it's just, I think having done that night rock climbing showed me that we could do it. And next time we'll have more, you know, safety precautions. Sure. No one got hurt, but we could have easily ended the trip right there.
Were there times during the trip, because this was, what, 38 days? This is like 13,000 plus miles. 38 days, 5 men, 2 cars, 2 guys that can't see very well. Were there times where you just thought, man, we're not going to make it. We're not going to be able to finish this?
Every day. We actually, it's not in the film, but the very first night, my brother and I got in a huge fight. Huge, like almost came to blows. Huge fight in the middle of New York City at 3 o'clock in the morning. We got in this huge fight. And I think a lot of that was it being the first day.
Yeah.
We had driven for probably 12 hours. And so once we got that out of our system, I think that brought us to a better level in our relationship. We got it out of our system, screaming and yelling at each other. Then all of a sudden we realized, okay, if we want to do this trip, we're going to have to realize that, yeah, you're going to get tired of each other, being in the car for 8 to 10 hours a day. And so once we got that out of our system, it was fine. And besides that, that was the main one that I thought would derail it the very first day. But it didn't. Obviously.
Was that a particular point of contention, or was it just this built-up anxiety of doing this trip?
I think it was maybe a little of both.
Yeah.
I think it was just the anxiety of prepping the trip. You know, we had shot kind of an introduction scene the night before, and we were up till 3 or 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
and then we left at 6. So it was just kind of a tired, long day, and us both not having kind of, you know, got our feelings out about what we wanted from the trip and what we wanted to do with the trip, things like that. So I think, but once we did that, once we discussed it in a very loud way, everything was fine.
Makes sense to me. One thing the audience is probably thinking, and it's a realistic logistical question to ask, well, Michael, you're telling us that these 2 gentlemen, one of them has 14% or 12% of his vision, the other one has 40, 50%, and yet you were able to drive. Now, I understand that you drove 90% of the trip,
Correct.
but there were times that even you could not drive.
Yes. I mean, the big thing about that was that Justin and I were both supposed to get an eye exam before the trip.
Yeah.
That was part of the movie. But unfortunately, with the doctors, we couldn't arrange the schedule and get actually into the eye doctor. So we started the trip not knowing how bad Justin's eyes were.
Yeah.
After about 3 or 4 days of the first 3 or 4 days of the trip, we kind of realized that Justin, we're all very uncomfortable. Sorry, Justin. We're all very uncomfortable with the way you drive. So I'm going to drive the majority of the trip from now on. And also there were 2 or 3 times where the director, Brian or Ryan, would take over and drive for us. Especially if it got past sunset, they would get out of the van, come and drive us to wherever we were headed to. Like actually getting to New York, I asked Brian to drive because for me and with my eyes, going into a big city at night is just horribly distracting and horribly unsafe for me. So I always, you know, would make him drive. If we're going, like we went into Chicago, we went into even Portland, you drive because there could be little kids running around, and I can see pretty well to drive, but I don't want to take any chances.
Understood. That's good. That's a good decision. I believe that both you and your brother are married now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so I'm sure that in the evenings, your wives do all the driving. Okay. But your brother, he can't drive at all
Correct.
these days, right? I mean, that's
Correct.
okay.
He actually had given his license up probably a week or 2 after we shot the film. He kind of, because when we went to the eye doctor,
Yeah.
he was kind of like, legally blind, I'm going to trust you, you got to turn in your license, you should not be driving anymore because it's just very unsafe. And being in the car with him and having the guys follow us in the van, watching him versus me behind the wheel, they were like, we don't like when he's driving. It's very, just doesn't feel safe. So, I mean, that was a contentious moment for him, my brother, because of course you never want to give up your license, you never want to give up that freedom you have. But he realized,
if you cannot see,
yeah, I mean, if you're seen like this,
Yeah.
you need to not drive. So
you guys also have, because I've watched several interviews with you and been following your story for a long time. There's the issue of the canes. Your brother is often seen during the film with his cane, and it's one of those canes that, you know, folds up. At one point, you tell him to put it away during the night hike. But I've heard you say that many times you use the cane not so much for you, but for the people
Right.
around you as a signal.
yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things to explain to people who can see completely well, you know, is that I use the cane when I usually go to crowded places and or dark places and airports. Airports are amazing with a cane. I get the board first, you know, I'm not complaining about that. But it's more or less for people to see that why am I walking so kind of weird, or why am I standing still or being slow? It's because I use the cane more of as a sign to people that, hey, I can't see well. And I think that's one of the things that people need to realize is that just because you use a cane doesn't mean you can't see anything. It just means you have a severe vision problem. Because I've had people at a festival I went to and I was using the cane, they would look at me and see that I could see, and they would kind of give me a look and you know, shake their head, and I'm just like, you can ask me why I'm using a cane, but I'm not completely blind. I just can't see well, especially in dark areas or crowded areas. And for me, the cane in those situations gives me a lot of freedom. You can be so you can bump into people and they won't think you're a jerk and confront you. They'll get out of the way quickly. And actually, I was at the airport one time and had my cane out, and I was in the line at one of the shops, and a guy cut right in front of me. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, hey man, I'm not that blind. And he goes, oh, sorry, and he got behind me. And I was just like, and of course now he's like thinking I'm a faker. And I'm just like, no, you can ask me why I'm using a cane, but it's for your benefit and my benefit.
That's an interesting point, because I think that most people, and this is unfortunate, because disabled people, a lot of times nobody wants to ask them what's wrong.
Right.
Why are you...
And I think it's because society, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
But society has put such a...
Unfortunate stigma?
Yes, on not only people with disabilities, but, oh, you shouldn't ask them about it. You shouldn't look at it. You shouldn't talk about it. It's like, no, you can. I'm more than willing to share my story with anybody who wants to listen. But personally, it's not the only thing about me that I share with people, but it's like, if I ask away.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you just heard that, because I've had the pleasure of working on some other documentaries with disabled people, and that was one of the things they said. It's like, hey, you know what? I'll talk about it. Come ask me what's wrong with me. I will tell you. I would rather talk to you and tell you my situation than to not be spoken to. Yeah. So if that's one wall we could break down today, that's a positive thing.
I think 100% behind that, because even like, when I see other blind people, like some of the festivals we've been to, there have been other blind people, I go right up to them and go, you know, hey, blindy, what's going on? And stuff like that. And so
I might not say that.
You probably shouldn't say that, but I think I have a little ticket to do that.
Sure.
Especially if I have my cane out. If I don't have my cane, then I'll get in trouble. And they're more than willing to say, you know, how much vision is left. They're more than willing to share their story with you and kind of, I think it's just very good to ask. It doesn't hurt. As long as you're not being rude, it's better to ask than to just kind of be a jerk to somebody, or think they're faking it, or have some preconceived ideas of to what a particular disability does or looks like, you know. And so, ask away, I say, do it.
Good. One other part of the film is many times you cut away to people that you meet in these various cities, and you ask them the question, what would they want to see before they went blind? And you get some interesting answers. And whose idea was it to intercut those things? Because it's pretty profound what people end up saying about what they would like to see.
Actually, I'm going to say that was my idea.
Good call.
I'm going to claim it right here. I may get in trouble.
As you should.
I'm pretty sure that was my idea. And part of that was we wanted to show, you know, let everybody think about it. And not only is it our experience and what we want to see, what we want to experience, but it's like, you can have this too. You can say, I want to see, I'd love to see the sunset on the beach, or I'd love to see my wife's face, or I'd love to see the animals at the zoo. And to me, that was so amazing that all these people had all these different ideas of what would be the perfect thing to look at if you couldn't see anymore, and have kind of embedded in your brain, in your memories, to keep with you forever. So
it's an inspirational thought, and by making this film, whether you guys wanted to or not, you've now kind of become spokespeople and experts on this condition. How does that feel for you? Are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with it? Are you?
I'm about 90% comfortable with it. It's very. You do feel a lot of pressure, a lot of weight, because I'm trying to, especially about the science.
Yes.
It's like, is that right? Okay, it's X-linked. It's this percentage. Blah 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 blah. So I've double checked numbers and stuff like that. So that aspect of it, I feel a little kind of nervous. But other than that, I feel that, you know, being a kind of a spokesperson it's great to get things out there to people and educate them and help them to learn, what disability is and what you can do, even if you are quote unquote disabled. So
you're in a position to be very inspirational to a lot of people who have this condition and have other conditions, because you guys went out there and did it. You said, listen, we're gonna make this bucket list of going around the U.S. We're gonna see these things that we want to see. This may be our last time. So by doing that, I think it's a liberating experience for people to see. And when you get to New Orleans, you meet this man, I can't remember his name.
Eric Hartman.
Yes, Eric
Hartman.
Eric Hartman. Eric has an advanced case of this, and yet, man, he's zipping around New Orleans, which is a spooky place, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just,
it can be very confusing, but he's lived there his whole life, and he is like I said in the movie too. He's like, he uses a cane and he just goes.
Because you even comment, you're like, man, I'm trying to keep up with you, and it's like,
and he just swings. He uses a cane, obviously, but he just goes. And actually, we were in New Orleans about a month ago for a film, for a screening, and we went to Jazz Fest, which is amazingly huge. So, and I actually saw him at Jazz Fest and went over and we talked. And I'm like, what are you doing here? I always come. What are you doing here? We're just here having a screening. So it was really cool to see him again after so much time had gone by with the film. But he's still, like, I think he has no fear anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think, once you get past that point, of being afraid of it, kind of getting in the tanks, it's like, you can't. You just go. You're going to bump into things. You're going to stumble. You're going to trip. People are going to think certain things about you, but you can't do anything about that. Just trying to keep a positive attitude, I think, would be the best thing to do.
So after you guys leave New Orleans, then you go to Florida, and then you eventually go back up the East Coast and wind up in D.C.?
We ended, actually, officially the trip ended in Grovetown, Georgia, which is where my parents live.
Yes, okay.
But then we did finish and go up to Washington, where my brother was living at the time.
Speaking of your parents, since this is a genetic situation that passes through the mother's side, did you guys have any knowledge that anyone on her family had this beforehand?
No, that was like one of the crazy things, is there was no history at all whatsoever of this disease anywhere that we could find. So it just kind of mutated and came out with my brother and I. So,
because I mean, it's not uncommon for it to skip generations, but in your particular case, both sons get it after no clear sign of it in the family lineage.
That's part of one of the things I think they're doing now with the research, is figuring out how it does that, why it does that, and how to kind of control it and stop it. So yeah, it just came out of nowhere. And like I said, my brother, I remember when I was in high school and in junior high, I had great night vision. I remember playing capture the flag at night and running through the woods, and I can't do that much anymore. So
I understand. When I was doing some research on the science, and it's mentioned in the film, you guys, it's possible that, certainly young kids coming up, because I'm reading about gene therapy, that there is people that are doing work on this, and you're involved with a group, and you're donating the proceeds from the film. Talk about this group.
It's called the Choroideremia Research Foundation, and it's basically it's a 501c charity group where you can donate, and they actually are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year straight to research on choroideremia. I mean, you have bigger charities that do general research, general help with eye issues. Foundation Fighting Blindness, they're amazing and they're big, but we wanted to work with this group because they were just for choroideremia. And we've raised, I want to say in the last year or two, almost $80,000.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, we actually just did a commercial with Ford, and that hopefully is going to air in October when it's Vision Awareness Month. But they donated $5,000 to the charity just to tell our story. So we're kind of hoping to keep going that way and keep raising funds and awareness and just trying to get more information about the disease to different people who can use it any way they want to.
Did Ford reach out to you guys? Did they find you?
I honestly think I've been doing a lot of marketing for the film over the last 2 years, and I had sent them a bunch of emails and Facebook messages and stuff like that, and I think finally enough of them had been through, and they'd actually gone through their emails and heard our story and asked, because our big thing was like we both cars are Fords. We drove a Ford Escape, and the crew drove a Ford cargo van, and we pitched that to them and pitched our film, pitched our story, and they said we wanted to go further campaign with you, and so we shot that back in March.
Well, kudos to them for stepping up like that. So what is next for you and your brother now?
Good question.
I mean, because this film has been in dozens and dozens of film festivals. That's how I first saw it. It did very well in many festivals. So now I'm assuming that you're moving on to your next project.
Yeah, there's some ideas that we're toying with. I would love to actually do a web series kind of based on the film. Not just basically about my brother and I, but us going to other and meeting new people who have overcome disabilities, either with vision or whatever disability it is, and are being a role model and an example. And I'd love to. That's kind of what we're toying with right now. My brother just had a baby.
Oh, fantastic!
Well, about December, so he's busy doing that right now, and he now lives in New Jersey. So he's kind of doing that. He actually created a card game that he's selling now on Amazon called Movie Buff.
Okay.
So it's about movie trivia. So that's what he's working on, and I've got a few other projects that I'm kind of toying with. I'm getting actually an editing bay set up at my house, hopefully this week, to start working on projects there.
Do you want to direct? Is that where we're headed next?
Like they say, I think I want to direct.
I get it.
Direct, I mean, I'm an editor.
Yeah.
Was what I do, but I love working. Brian and I, the director, actually cut the movie, edited the film ourselves in a probably year-and-a-half period right after work. And I think being in that bay and working on telling the actual story was, to me, so cool. It was just cool to see it coming together and just slowly, piece by piece, it kind of told the story. And I just kind of fell in love with that. I'd already been, in the storytelling mode, but to actually have a piece and something that you're working on that it's just two people. There's nobody else involved. There's nobody else that you have to worry about. It's just you guys talking it out and figuring out the storyline was really cool and really a fun experience.
Again, I have to ask you a logistical question because you are involved in the visual arts. And as you said, it seems like your deterioration of your vision is kind of leveled off. So I would just think it would be challenging moving forward, continuing to work in a visual medium.
What?
Gotta say it, bro.
Man, wow, way too soon, bro.
I know it.
It's funny because everybody...
Listen, if anybody's gonna pull it off, it's gonna be you. I know that.
I don't really work, I just fake and press buttons. It's really, everybody asks me about that. How do you edit
So I'm not
shows?
the only guy.
Oh, no.
Okay.
When, you're blind. And I'm like, well, usually I respond, well, I do it by, sense of smell. I smell the scene. But computer screens, I can see...
They all stink, by the way.
Exactly. The computer screens, I can see fine. It's everything else, like the glass I said earlier and stuff like that. I can't see that. The screens so far are no problem.
That makes sense.
And it's also like nowadays there are so many different programs and devices and apps that can help visually impaired people work on computers. My brother's still on the computer all the time, and he's down to 12%. So I think, if you were going to be going blind, now's the time to go blind. Technology, I met a woman who's locally here in Los Angeles who runs a charity group, and she's completely blind. She was outpacing me on her iPhone amazingly fast with voiceover stuff and just going through her phone and showing me stuff, and I'm just like, wow, that's amazing that you can do that because I can't even go that fast, and I can see my screen, so.
Wow. Well, Todd Purvis, I wish you continued luck. I mean, the film is great. Ladies and gentlemen, it's called Driving Blind. Tell everybody where they can see it and find out more about the foundation.
They can see the film at our website, drivingblindfilm.com, where it's only 99 cents on Vimeo. 99 cents to rent and like $2.99 to buy. You can also see it on Amazon Instant, where I don't know what the price is, but it's not as cheap as our site, but it's still good quality.
Well, if you've got Amazon Prime, you might even be able to see it for free.
It'd be free. And also a smaller site called IndieFlix is hosting it, and they've been hosting it for about a year now. And you can also get in contact with the Corderima Research Foundation through our website. We have a link, and once again, that's drivingblindfilm.com. And you can also contact any of us and ask us any questions.
I think you're doing great work, man. You're an inspiration. Keep it up, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Parker. This has been episode 15 of Antidote. My guest has been Todd Purvis. Please see his film, Driving Blind. Until next week, remember, you, me, All of us together, we are the antidote.